Hi, today we will be dealing with a new topic which is evolution of psychology. Evolution of psychology is a stage by stage approach or understanding how psychology has developed so far from the ages. From ancient time, though we have a great philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and many others, definitely today psychology, which is what we are seeing, is a very modern subject and a modern science, which is just 150 years old. So, however, though it is 150 years or old or a modern science, we have to understand where and how it developed. So, definitely, we have to study and understand each milestone of psychology to understand this session, which is evolution of psychology. Evolution is nothing but a stage by stage growth, the study of milestones of anything. So, without any delay, we'll go forward and see what are all in this evolution. The first, which we can see, is the impact of Western psychology. Definitely, as for the industrial revolution concern, European countries and American countries has their foot forward against or putting the Asian countries behind, they move forward. So modern psychology has a great contribution from Western side, though there is a notable and important development from Indian side in 20th century. Our Indian establishments are also got trainings from or a basics learning from Western side only. So if you see this slide, it is observed that if Western psychology has a practical approach and outside approach, whereas Indian approach is an internal travel or internal examination, which is purely concentration on the self or individual basis. Whereas Western psychologists see the behavior side and Indian psychology sees the individual side. Okay, so evolution of psychology has two parts. Today we will be seeing the Western developmental side, and tomorrow we will see the significant uh, contributions or significant landmarks in the evolution of psychology and Indian contribution towards it. So in this session, we will see Western side of approach and what are the milestones from the Western side. So coming to the next point, modern psychology, William Boone. William Boone. William Boone has a great contribution, given a very experimental approach to the psychology, modern psychology. If we see, so far in the sessions also we discussed William Boone as one of the important contributors for modern times. He is the first person to establish a laboratory in scientific laboratory in Leipzig, and he is also one of the evolutionary psychologists who studied psychology as a part by part basis. If you can see, he was a reductionist who believed the whole was better understood by breaking it down into components. If he wants to study the behavior, he will see different parts or components of the behavior. What are the organs or what are the areas, what are the conditions affecting that behavior? In that way, William Wood had given a new approach to the study of psychology. So, William Wood, the modern psychology will be starting from the study or the establishment of and contributions of William Wood. So next point is introspection. In the times of beginning of modern psychology, where the experimental tradition is very less and observational methods are high. In one of such observational methods is introspection. Introspection is a method, definitely it is also a famous word today, even in these times, because it gives the idea of that one person or the strengths and weakness of the person to understand deeply about how strength he or she was. In introspective method, we will examine ourselves, travel into our own self, observe the self to understand what are the strengths of a particular person. These mental processes and experiences in this introspection method cannot be observed by other people. So definitely it cannot be understood. What the method used by me cannot be understood by the other person. It is a individual journey and it's very unique to every person. So it is not experimental basis and cannot be given credits to this method, though it is a valid and valuable one. Okay, so let's see the next one. There is another approach which is functionalism or functionalistic approach. The major contributors for this approach is William James and John Dewey. John Dewey and William James, coming to the contribution of this William James and Controversies, they studied on consciousness or basic human needs. John Dewey, he is an educational thinker and he also studied functionalism as an environmental approach and how human being can adapt the environment. So basically these approaches have seen a major foot forward step to the modern psychology, where William Boone and other psychologists, functionalistic approach, behavioristic approach, introspection approach, these are the methods which people has observed and adopted to understand psychology, or we can see this is the initial development of modern psychology in 19th century. And if we see 20th century as two parts, if you consider the first part of the 20th century is revolutioned or taken forwarded by Gestalt psychologists. So Gestalt approach, if you see Gestalt approach, it is one of the path-breaking approaches or path-breaking methods to understand methods in psychology, how a human being will behave and understand the subject, understand the objects which he sees, how he assimilate information, receive information, the sensitive organs process the information to understand the environment is this Gestalt approach. This is a part of structuralism. In Gestalt, psychologists are a group of psychologists who study psychologists as a sum or the wholeness. It is like if you see this example here, though it is closed or there is a gap, we can identify the letter as G. So there are some other colors involved in particular alphabet E, we can identify it as a E. So it is an experience earlier that awareness alphabets will, the brain will definitely process as a whole. Like previous knowledge, it will directly move us to understand any concept. Generally, even in recent time, I have studied some different alphanumeric paragraph, whether it is like a brain teaser, brain tester, we can study that. Brain adopts anything and it is not a difficult thing. So definitely you should, the more you practice or the more mental food given to the brain, it will affect uh, work effectively. Here there is also principle of closure, principle of similarity. In that alphabet T, though it is sliced into several parts, we can identify it as a T. In figure and ground, though there are some parts missing in letter alphabet A, it is we can identify it as A. Though it is combined with A and L, you can separately see L as a separate alphabet letter. So in that way, Gestalt psychologists see as a whole or some principles how we process the information. So moving to the next slide, there is a approach which is behavioristic approach. So far, functionalism, structuralism, introspection, or experimental method, whatever these approaches are, from now it is a another way of approach. So far it is practical approach. Now it is human based, or we try to understand the biological basis, biological processes in any method. If we can take this behavioristic approach or behaviorism, these two, even Pavlov and B.F. Skinner, Pavlov classical conditioning theory, which is based on an experiment of a dog and its food. Here he studied stimulus and response. By giving a new stimulus, old stimulus can be replaced. This is the whole experiment which we will be discussing in more detail in the coming sessions. Coming to the Skinner's operant conditioning theory, he will be experimenting on the basis of positive and negative reinforcement. Positive and negative reinforcement, how it affects our human behavior. These are the two important psychologists, and these theories have a next level of understanding in evolution of psychology. Moving forward, he is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is one of the revolutionary psychologists in evolution of psychology. His contributions had made path-breaking innovations and contributions to psychology. Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic theory, psychoanalytic method, and uh, many of his works like interpretation of dreams, unconscious needs and desires of a human being, all these are inventions of Sigmund Freud, and it is a different dimension of approach to study psychology. So definitely Sigmund Freud is a revolutionary psychologist in evolution of psychology. His psychodynamic theory is still highly, people will try to understand more about his approach. So next, it is humanistic approach. Humanistic approach. Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow are the key psychologists in this approach. Abraham Maslow, human need hierarchy theory. What are the priorities of a human being? How a human being wants his, like say, what are the needs and their levels? He put some stages to the theory and how a human being look or wants his desires in a step-by-step basis. Physical needs, social needs, and There is about the self actualization about a human being is explained clearly by Abraham Maslow. So far we have seen different types of approaches. Here, maybe I missed in the front, we have to recall the main points. What are the main points and what are the basic pillars of a psychology? It is biological approach, cognitive approach, developmental approach, social and personality approach, mental and physical health. Here if we can see, biology is a physical study or understanding of a human being. What are the parts of brain? What are the important areas in brain? What are hormones? What are the biological effect on brain? Next, cognitive. It is mental processes. Developmental. Developmental or other social and personality approaches are, are the external components. It is like understanding the mind. Biological approach and uh, developmental approach, these are the two areas which we saw today. See, there are few psychologists who try to understand psychology on outside knowledge basis. There are few psychologists who try to understand from the needs and desires and unconscious levels and experimenting on animals to make us understand that every method in psychology is a unique method. It has its own merits and demerits. The contributions of particular method definitely give new ideas to further our new age of psychologists. As we said, Gestalt psychology is one of the path-breaking methods to understand psychology. Of course, William Boone, by establishing a new experimental laboratory, he found a new way to study psychology in a experimental method. So far, we have seen many approaches like psychodynamic approach, socialistic approach, humanistic approach, observational, social, and many cognitive approach. Now we will see cognitive and the final approach. This developmental and cognitive approach is one of the cognitive functions, how the brain works based on the perception, learning, uh, forgetting, memory, or the cognitive principles. There is also another one like there are two important psychologists who contributed a lot, and their contributions definitely have a great impact and to study. He is Piaget. Piaget cognitive development theory clearly explains how a human being develops and his cognitive functions develop. On the other hand, Vygotsky experimented a lot on children and make us understand who a children is, what are the developments of a children. Vygotsky played a clue sorry, very crucial role in evolutionary psychology. So far, we discussed evolutionary approaches and modern developments of psychology. Tomorrow, in the next session, we will see notable or milestones in the development of psychology. 18, 17, 19th century. Let's see the history, how psychology is developed from the western side and coming to the India, we have to understand who are the important people contributed to Indian psychology and what are the developments so far in Indian India country. So with this, I end this session and request you to write your any of the queries in this session. So from this session, I can come to a conclusion or conclusive understanding that you have some good basic knowledge of psychology. From today, we can jump into the key concepts and go in some speed basis to understand the subject and to move in a good pace with the subjects. We can discuss more in detail about the things, and definitely looking forward for your participation and queries. Okay, so that's how we end up our session today. Thank you so much for the participation. Tomorrow we will see one more session.